welcome to Sid Cordle after his triumph at your conference. I think you're worn out, aren't you, Sid, to be honest?
Well, I'm recovering now. We have had the conference was Friday, Saturday, so I've had yesterday to recover though.
Although
Yesterday
yesterday
morning, I
morning
just
I
had
just
to
had
take
to
my
take my
wife to
wife to
Stansted
Stansted
Airport, so I had
Airport,
to
so I
get
had to
up
get
at
up at
6:45, which wasn't ideal,
ideal.
but anyway, it was a great occasion.
Well, listen, it's the season. We seem to have had more this year than ever before. What was your chief? Well, everybody has for their particular conference a target. What was your speciality this year?
Well, that's an interesting question. You see, our aim in the CPA conference is to glorify God, and we really on Friday, the which was the pre-meeting, we were worshipping and praising outside the church with an Israeli flag and a flag of Great Britain side by side, and we had a lot of reaction from people coming past, including police. so. And we actually had two Jewish ladies who came up with tears in their eyes and said how fantastic it was to see people supporting Israel, because that's a fundamental part of what we stand for. And then we had Dr. Brad Norman who came in, and he was prophesying over us and speaking into people's lives, and that was really a powerful occasion as well as speaking into the nation. So, we're not just about having discussions, we're about seeking God and glorifying God. And one of the key parts of Saturday, which was the main conference, Saturday went on from 9:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock, and when I did my speech. But one of the best bits was before lunch. Janet Bickerdike came on at 12:30, and she talked about Rishi Sunak putting Diwali lights outside 10 Downing Street, honouring Hindu gods. And she said, God is a jealous God, which it tells us in the Bible, you shall have no other gods before me. And she said that this action, she believes, has actually brought a curse on the Conservative Party, which is why the Conservative Party ever since has really been suffering. And unless they repent of this action, then the Conservative Party may never rise again. That was what she said. But she also said that we have to do the opposite. She talked about Islam as well, what Islam was doing in the nation. But she said we have to do the opposite. We have to praise God and worship God and give Him glory. And we then spent about 20 minutes just with some extravagant worship, praising God and giving Him honor and giving Him glory. And when she finished, we had Prophet Johnson there, who has got a real mandate to bring revival to the nation. We've been doing various prophetic acts with him, not least in Hadrian's Wall, which we did recently. But he came to the conference. He wasn't a guest speaker, but he registered, paid, and came. And so obviously I had to bring him on. So I brought him on after Janet, and it'll all be on video. And he just talked about the significance of the St. George's flag and the significance of the Union Jack and how these represent godly people that have brought Christianity to the nation. That's what our flag represents, and the importance of the flag, and how we honour the flag, and how many people at the moment are putting up flags all over the nation. And this is actually Christian, it's a sign of Christianity. The media are trying to make out that it's all far right. It's not far right. This is Christianity. And when I gave my speech, I won't give you all the details of what I talked about, but in a nutshell, I talked about how the Labour Party in this nation have failed to honour God and have gone down their own path, and how it has led to disaster
Disaster
after
after
disaster
disaster
on
on
issue
issue
after
after
issue.
issue.
And I
And I
contrasted it
contrasted
with
it with
Donald Trump, who is absolutely called of God to be the leader of the United States and is honouring God in that position, and how Donald Trump is, as a result, wildly popular and has had success after success in what he's been doing as leader of the United Nations. So leaders that honour God have success. Leaders that reject God face problems and difficulties and failure. That's the message of what's going on in the world right now.
It's a question also of people opening their eyes, maybe, to the truth. We naturally would believe in the natural and the ability of men to solve our problems. It has its limits, doesn't it, Sid?
Well, yes, absolutely, and it's interesting. The Bible actually says that God appoints rulers, and you look at some rulers and you think, how can God possibly have appointed that ruler? But undoubtedly, there are some people that God raises up. And it's interesting, one of my favourite verses in the Bible is Ezekiel 22, verse 30, where it says, I look for a man to stand in the gap for the land. And it's quite interesting. You see, God doesn't look for thousands of people. I look for a mass of people that would, I look for a demonstration of 5,000 people that would come and represent me. No, no, no. God looks for a man, somebody who will speak his word faithfully, and stand before him, which is obviously what Moses did. I love the story of Moses when he stands before the Lord after the golden calf rebellion and says, please forgive them, God, if not, then blot me out from the book. But please forgive them, they've sinned. And God says, you're not going to be blotted out. I'll have mercy on whom I have mercy. But he looked for a man to stand for the nation, and Moses stood for the nation, and Israel was forgiven. And I guess that's what we need in Great Britain right now. We need a man to stand for the nation on the media and to speak God's word to the nation. And that's what we need, is to bring forgiveness to the nation. But it's that's where we are.
Let's fly over the Atlantic because a lot of parallels here. And I'm thinking of the two major events in recent years that are a bit of a barometer and maybe a pointer where to go. I'm thinking of the death of George Floyd, which was immediately, even though he was a criminal with a long history, there were awful events after that. And it went on for years, literally. Cities set on fire, people killed. And I'm comparing it with Charlie Kirk, a godly family man. No riots, innocent man, a peaceful man, and all we get is peaceful vigils, contemplation, and let's learn our lesson from this. Bit of a divergence there, isn't there, Sid?
Yeah, well, I find it absolutely shocking the way the left have almost been celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder in some quarters. I find it absolutely shocking because he was a man of debate, which is what we seek to do. It's I spent 10 years going down to Speaker's Corner debating with Muslims, by and large. I mean, we also debated with atheists as well, but it was more debated with Muslims. And I'm very proud of the fact that, on one occasion, after I spent an hour literally debating with this Muslim guy and really laying into the Quran and what it says and what it stood for. And at the end of it, he says to me, "Oh, Sid, before you go, I want to give you something as a sign of our friendship." And to me, that's what it's about. It should be possible for us to disagree fundamentally, and but still have respectful debate, and to be able to talk and say, well, yeah, I disagree, but this is why, and listen to what your opponents say. In fact, why I'm talking like this, by the way, a bigot is somebody who is intolerant of those they disagree with. And sometimes they accuse us of being bigots, but actually it's them that are bigots. It's them that refuse to listen to those they disagree with. But you see, but they couldn't beat Charlie Kirk in debate. He was so good they couldn't beat him. So instead of beating him, they kill him. And to me, that shows the utter cowardice of the left. If they're celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk because they couldn't beat him in debate, it shows their complete cowardice, and it shows that they've lost the argument, frankly.
Sid, things are bad in France at the moment. I think they're on the fifth prime minister in 5 years. That's a record, I think. And they have been experimenting with a wealth tax over the years, which hasn't worked. And I mention this now because Rachel is thinking, apparently, of doing the same thing in her November budget at the end of November, leaving it to the last minute to spoil our Christmas, no doubt. And it's been worked out that if you tax the 350 mega rich people, billionaires, most of them in the UK, 1%, then you get £7 billion. Drop in the ocean, that. If you tax them 2%, which nobody's had the temerity to do that for very long in the world, then you've got 14, 15 billion. Now, this obviously is not the answer. Maybe one of the answers is to stop taxing us and start cutting benefits.
Well, let's just talk about the wealth tax for a minute. By the way, the situation in France is really strange because it's the president that appoints the prime minister, not Parliament that appoints the Prime Minister. And the result of this is that the President's party, because they're, I believe, less than a third of the members of Parliament in France, he can't actually appoint a Prime Minister from his own party that commands the majority of Parliament. So we have all these prime ministers being appointed that don't command the majority of Parliament. So after a month they resign, and it's just farcical, frankly. But at least we don't have that problem in the UK. But if I just move on to the wealth tax, you're absolutely right, because you see, the problem with the wealth tax is that the rich people all leave and go abroad if you start taxing people a percentage of their wealth. And you see, the only party in the last general election that actually had the wealth tax in their manifesto was the Green Party. And the Green Party said, similar to what you're saying, that anyone that has more than 10 million in wealth will be taxed 1%. That was what it said in their manifesto. And they said that they would raise 84 billion from it. And I actually said in the hustings, I said, this figure is completely wrong. The maximum that they'll raise is 8 billion. So it basically means that they've got a 76 billion hole in their manifesto, because there's no way that they're ever going to raise 84 billion. So the 76 billion of spending commitments, which are unfinanced. So really, the Green Manifesto makes no sense at all. Now, I was saying this in the hustings, and it's interesting. They turned to the Green candidate, and how do you respond? And the Green candidate had no idea. I mean, he just had no idea what was in his manifesto and no idea that it didn't add up. And of course, the media, being so wonderfully friendly to the Green Party, won't turn round to them and saying, sorry, your manifesto doesn't add up, it's complete nonsense. But it's interesting, you see, having been in the Green Manifesto, the left wing of the Labour Party think, oh, what a wonderful idea, we should do what the Greens are suggesting. And so they're telling Rachel Reeves, oh, look, look at the Green Manifesto, they've got the answer, do what they're suggesting. That's what's going on at the moment. But like you say, it's been tried in France and they gave up because it didn't work. So we're going to try and do something that's already been proven not to work. I mean, the whole thing is utterly farcical, frankly.
Well, if you get ideologues in charge and their own ideology is the one to go for, this is what happens. Let's move on to something really important. And in one sense, let's leave politics on one side, although politics gets into everything. Fusion. I remember, Sid, you and I having a conversation 12 months ago, and we both pointed out that it can happen, it can work. Now, fission as opposed to fusion has never really worked. It's very tricky. All we need is a little sun spread about the Earth to form fusion reactors, and our problems are solved for all our energy needs. And that's true. A bit more sophisticated than that. And 12 months ago, there was great rejoicing because basically everything works out stuff in, stuff out. Now they've managed, or hitherto to 12 months ago, never managed to get more power out than they put in to cause a fusion reaction. But 12 months ago they did. For every £1 they put in, they actually got 1.1 out. Now it only, doesn't sound a lot, and it wasn't. To make it commercial, it needs to be 1 in, 10 out. That's the goal. Well, in 12 months, thanks to the Chinese, it's 1 in, 4 out already. And it's confidently expected that by 2031, we'll have something very, very viable. And the Chinese have really leapfrogged the US and the United Kingdom. Beware, there are writings on the wall there. Whoever gains this much power will rule the world. So everybody's starting to wake up. Now, without getting too technical, the revolution here is that you need a special kind of plasma to give heat. And the only way to control that plasma is by mega magnets to hold it in place. And a month ago, they've managed 70 minutes before the plasma collapsed of holding it in place. It's only a matter of time and a matter of making a chamber heat proof by some precious metal that doesn't burn everything down before this happens. So there we are technically. It's going to happen a lot quicker than maybe we thought, because the thought was 2050. There's an important date for the net zero people, but it's going to happen a long way before then. And they've got to create super magnets to hold this plasma in place. Who's going to rule the world? Well, we better get sorted out, because China will undoubtedly lead the world.
And that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, but, that's reckoning without God, and it's, ultimately, the more I look at events, international events, everything that's going on in the world, the more you realize that actually God has everything under control. And there may well be situations where you think, oh, this is terrible, this is awful. We know there's awful things going to happen because the Bible tells us that we won't be able to buy or sell without the mark of the beast. And this is going to come in, and we can actually see now how it will come in. It'll come in by people having to have a chip. We already have it compulsory for every dog that you own to have a chip implanted, so that if you lose that dog, somebody can come with some gun and say, right, okay, we find out who this dog belongs to, and then and give it back to its owner. That has to be happen with every dog. So we already have the technology to put chips in people, and it's gonna be refined more and more. I mean, in the days of AI, I mean, it's everything's advancing very, very quickly, and people will say, "Oh, it's new technology, it's advanced technology. It's what we need. Everyone needs to have a chip. It'll make purchasing so easy." I mean, they're even talking about people getting on trains. Even now, they're basically saying, you won't need a ticket anymore. You just get on the train and get off the train, and the computer will know when you get on, and the computer will know when you get off, and will just debit your bank account according to how long you've been on the train. It's the days of buying tickets and putting tickets into a machine will be over, because the implants that will be in your body will detect what you're doing, where you're going, and debit your bank account. I mean, this is what we're coming to. But you see, the problem with all this technology is that it can be misused. And what can actually happen is that you know, they can misuse it to try and influence your emotions and your attitudes and so on and so forth, which is basically what 1984 tells us. But we know this can happen. So, I'm sorry to put it in these terms, but the reality is that what the devil plans can be very nasty. But God will be victorious ultimately. But what we as Christians, I'm afraid, are going to have to be in a position to say, I'm sorry, but I don't want the chip implanted in my body. And I'm not willing to have it. Now, we've already had this trial of this with the vaccine because, I mean, a lot of Christians, not all, I mean, some Christians had the vaccine without a shadow of a doubt, but I think many who had it will regret it. I think, and anyone that did have the vaccine could claim what it says in Mark. You drink any poisonous thing, but it won't affect you. So you can say, God, please forgive me, and, I pray this won't affect me. But I certainly didn't have it, and I know many Christians that said, no, I'm not having this vaccine. I don't want it. Now that was a trial, if you like, and by the way, the guy that came and spoke at our conference on Friday, he was one of very few churches in the United Kingdom that never locked down during COVID, that carried on having services right throughout the period, and didn't close once. And God bless him for having that courage and having that guts. And it's great to be connected with people like that. But we're going to have, as Christians, we're going to have at some point, we're going to have the guts to turn round to the powers that be and say no. And the Bible tells us that. So, but, those that say no, we're standing for God, we're not submitting ourselves to this evil process, will be victorious, and will go to heaven. And that's what really matters.
Don't forget in all this the dreaded ID card, Sid. That's the chip placed in our breast pocket for
Well,
safekeeping, but all right, not inserted below the skin, but with the modern technology. It's not like which we've had for more than 40 years in Spain and Portugal. We've been subject to ID cards, but nothing like the one that is going to come to the United Kingdom if this government indeed remain in power.
Absolutely, because they're basically saying it's not going to be a card. No one's going to be sent an ID card. This is your ID card. It's going to be digital. They said it's going to be digital. So what's going to happen? I mean, presumably they're going to say it's going to be on your phone. I presume. I
Well,
don't
yes,
know.
they've actually stated that, Sid. So, ho, ho, ho for anybody over age 70.
Yeah. So if you haven't got an iPhone, then you can't work basically because they've actually said that every employer has got to make sure that all their employees have the digital ID. And they said it's not going to be compulsory, so I guess what you're saying for people over 70, maybe will be allowed to say, well, I don't want it, and they're not working, so it doesn't matter. I mean, but
Well, we've been caught out again, haven't we, with our cleverness? We're now required to work, or will be in the next couple of years, to over 70. How they
yeah,
can cope with that one?
well, yes, and they could also say, that you're not entitled to claim benefits unless you've got the digital ID. And they could say you're not entitled to the state pension unless you have your digital ID. I mean, all these things could happen. And like you say, they're making everyone work longer anyway. So what they're planning is corrupt and evil, in my view. And absolutely, I'm totally opposed to the ID, digital ID. And interestingly enough, we've actually the last time I looked, 2.75 million people had signed the petition against digital ID.
Mm.
And I think, well, I've predicted, and I would predict again now, that the backbenchers in the Labour Party will say no because it's so unpopular. They don't want to be more unpopular. They're pretty unpopular now, and they don't want to be more unpopular. So I think Keir Starmer's already been forced to back down twice over ID cards and benefits, and he'll probably be forced to back down over this because I think, because there's so many people saying no.
Which leads us on to too late Kemi. She's come up with the right right answers at last with ECHR and the immigration problem. It's only a more detailed copy of Nigel, who has been in receipt of a number of heavyweights from the Conservative Party, indeed from other parties. He's doing all right, and we're not even close, allegedly, to an election. How many more are going to jump ship?
Well, it is interesting. We have had one Labour councillor that's joined Reform, and I think Reform, if they're going to have some sort of balance, can't just be taking people from the Conservative Party. They do need to have some people from the Labour Party, but there may well be, I think, people in the Labour Party are more likely to jump ship to the Green Party, but there may well be some who just want to stay in power. And the reason why the Conservative Party members are, a lot of them are saying joining Reform, or, basically because that apparently at the moment that is the route to staying in Parliament. And it's quite interesting. I was reading something today about Danny Kruger and how some people were in his constituency were saying, well, we should have a by-election because we elected a Conservative, he's now left the Conservative Party, so we should have a by-election. But when this was put to Danny Kruger, he basically said, well, if they want to do that, fair enough, but it won't actually get them anywhere because at the moment, in opinion polls in his constituency, which is East Wiltshire, I believe, they said there's overwhelming majority are now wanting reform. So, reform are way ahead in opinion polls. So if you insist on a by-election, you won't get anywhere. It'll only just show how unpopular the Conservative Party is. So, and Nigel Farage quite rightly is saying, I don't want loads of by-elections because imposing loads of by-elections on members of the public because they've changed parties, is just a ridiculous expense that will get us nowhere. So I don't want that. But while we're talking like this, by the way, it is very interesting that last Thursday there were 7 seats up for grabs in council by-elections, and Reform won 6 of the 7. And even in the 7th, they got 32% of the vote, and Labour only held on by a very narrow amount. But in one of the wards, actually where 3 seats came up for grabs in Maidstone, the Reform got over 60% of the vote, which leads me to think, the way you're looking at it, the opinion polls, which at the moment are giving Reform 35%, those opinion polls could well be underestimating the Reform vote. And if you see what happened last May, where they took control of 10 councils and did way better than expected, so they did way better than the opinion polls were predicting, even though Reform are flying very high in the opinion polls, they're probably actually understated their vote. And opinion polls do this. If they don't like somebody, they underrate their vote and they overestimate the vote of people they like. This goes on all the time.
Yeah, politics, you see. And having said that, I'm going to give you a headline. War, what war? We're already at war with Russia and China. Right, what does that mean? Well, open your eyes, folks. Russia is testing various boundaries, frontiers of countries already with their drones and fighter aircraft, testing the resolve of NATO. Drone wall is coming along, and let's hope the Ukrainians, who've already been very successful in inventions of this kind, even before the Ukrainian problems, they're masters at these tiny little killing machines. And it appears that Britain is ahead of the game and is required to produce this drone wall to ensure our safety in Europe for the whole of Europe. So we're going to invent drones. Some of the drones are not far short of full-size aircraft, of course. Others are tiny. They've got their own individual uses. Now, we're used to lies through social media and through governments. But governments are getting really cute, especially again, Russia and China. And as part of their at war scenario is to produce false information. This has always gone on. World War One, World War Two, you name it. And some people are prepared to believe what they say. Oh, well, he must know what he's talking about. But no, this is all part of gaslighting, brainwashing, call it what you will. And it's going on now. The Cold War, Sid, is really back with us.
Yes, yes, it's interesting because and they reckon that Russia's actually been shooting down British satellites in space, British military satellites, that is. So yeah, I mean, which is if they're shooting down British military satellites in space, you see, people won't see it as an act of war. Most people won't even know it's happened, but then the powers that be know it's happened, so they know that it's going on. Russia is very angry with Britain, by the way, because of what happened in Ukraine. Because if people don't know, um, Putin thought that he was going to invade Ukraine, and within 3 days, Zelensky would be out of power, and he would put his puppet in place, and that would basically be the end. It would be over and done with. See, what actually happened was that, well, and Biden, by the way, was totally on board with that. He was actually telling Zelensky to leave and advising him, "Oh yeah, yeah, we'll help you get out." He was basically doing what Putin wanted at that point at the beginning of the war. The one person that said no, we must fight Russia, we can beat them, we can stop them invading your country, was Boris Johnson. And he took the lead internationally in giving Zelensky the power to fight back. And of course, well, we know what happened. Zelensky did fight back effectively, stopped Russia taking control of Ostomol Airport, which was their plan. They just was planned to put all the loads of soldiers in there. They're going to take the airport, and then all the trucks that were queuing up were all going to go to Ostomol Airport, which was going to be then the headquarters from which they would launch their attack on Kiev and Zelensky will be out. They never took Ostomol Airport. They never succeeded in taking it, which is why all the trucks were just queuing up on the road because they could never get to their what was supposed to be their headquarters. So, but the reason I'm saying all this was because Putin was furious with Britain, and is still furious with Britain, for what we did, and is still threatening Britain. I'm going to send, well, as I say, he's probably actually wiping out some of our military satellites now. And this is what you're saying. This war is this hidden war is going on even now, and I think you're absolutely right. It is going on, in a hidden way, in a side with cyber attacks and goodness knows what. But you see, this Labour government we've got now is completely ill-equipped to deal with it. They've got no idea probably what's going on. There may be some people in the Defence Department that fully understand what's going on, but they're not equipped to make any proper military decisions. They're completely ill-equipped.
Let's have a look at Keir Starmer in more detail under the title of hypocrisy. You hypocrite. What's that about? Well, early in the 2000s, he set up a scheme, very legitimate, to avoid inheritance tax through his parents, through trust funds. He did it a better way than Angela did, of course. He should do, being a lawyer. And there again, it was all set up. And it's avoid him paying lots of inheritance tax until they changed the law again on IHT. Now, I mentioned this. What's wrong with it? He did it legitimately. I'll tell you what's wrong with it. A clip from a news item I saw, 2003, when he was setting up the trust. And it said, we're going to stop It's wrong. It's immoral. Any avoidance, not evasion, any avoidance of tax by these rich people. That's exactly what he was doing, Sid. That's why I say, and many others, you hypocrite, again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. Yeah, you see, the Labour Party basically are complete hypocrites right across the board because we've seen it with Angela Rayner. You know, oh, we've got to tax the rich, we've got to tax the rich, we must increase stamp duty. Anyone with second homes, we must hit them hard. You know, anyone with second homes, increase the stamp duty to make it very expensive and drive people with second homes. You know, suddenly like, well, you've got a second home. Oh, yeah, and the stamp duty's gone up. You got 40,000 stamp duty to pay on your second home. Oh, well, I'll have to change it then. I'll have to say that this is my first home. And suddenly she's found to be fiddling the system. And she's now out of office because she fiddled the system. So is it surprising that Keir Starmer's also trying to fiddle the system in some way? You know, I'm not in the slightest bit surprised because this is typical of the Labour Party. They they think, you know, oh, we've got to tax the rich, we got to get money off the rich, we've got to get money off all these rich people with inheritance. And it's like you turn to them and say, well, wait a minute, you're going to fall into this. It's like, oh no, I'm not rich. I'm not part of the rich the people we're trying to tax. Oh no, I'm part of the party. You know, this is what goes on in communism, isn't it? You know, you remove the capitalist system, get rid of the rich, and the elites become the leaders of the party. And the leaders of the party can do what they want. They can be as rich as they like. You know, it's just utter left wing hypocrisy. That's the reality of it.
From Starmer to Starbucks, back over the pond. Well, both sides of the pond. They've decided to close a lot of stores, both sides of the pond. Actually, at the same time, they're creating 80 new ones, but super duper ones with lots of nice atmosphere, they say, in the United Kingdom. But a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. I wonder why. Well, two things are pointed out. Number one, £6 for a cup of coffee. In other words, £42 a week. Who's got that sort of money? Well, maybe in parts of London and other rich centres in the United Kingdom. But you mentioned this to the average Spaniard who pays about £1 odd for a much superior brew. They don't believe you. Now, there's nothing wrong with the product of Starbucks, but at that price, Sid, you really wonder. That's one reason that their profits are going down. The other reason is that they seem to be on the side of Israel. And at the moment, the Yuppeites, there's an old word, who like their cup of coffee, don't like you if you've got anything to do with Israel. So those two things have tightened your belt, Starbucks, because things in this changing world are not the same as they were.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in the background there are people that are boycotting any company which they think is pro-Israel, but the opposite is also happening. You see, it's quite interesting. We've had a number of companies that decided that they want to put forward woke adverts, and
And
one of the
one of the
worst
worst
examples
examples
was
was
Land
Land
Rover
Rover
Jaguar,
Jaguar.
and they
They
put forward their wonderful woke advert, which didn't have a car in it, and the result was that their sales absolutely nosedived. I mean, they literally went almost to nil. There was so few sales going on, and now the government's trying to prop them up. So and we've had other companies. I mean, it's the same with Disney. Disney decided that they were going to go woke and produce all these terrible Disney films, and all the terrible Disney films they produce have dive bombed. People don't want to watch them. So it doesn't just work one way. It does work the other way as well. But I think the basic lesson is that it's best to keep your head down in business and not to go over the top, promoting any political ideology. I think that's the lesson, frankly.
Yep, it's ephemeral, it's transient, it will change. Courage, mon ami. Let's tell the business people not to jump into DEI traps straight away. Before we finish with the conference season, things I noticed about the Labour Party conference, can learn a lot, the backdrops, whether it be fringe meetings or main meetings. It was supposed to be about flying the flag. I didn't see that many flags except those brought in cheekily by GB News and presented to the various attendees of the conference for them to wave. Most of them, through gritted teeth, accepted the gift and waved the flag. But I'll tell you what stood out for me, Sid, they've still got the LGBT symbol at the back of the speakers. That is nothing to do with politics. Clearly it is.
Well, the way I see it is it's a religion. The religion being New Age, and there's plenty of information which I can provide people on the root of New Age and where it comes from. And if people don't know, New Age is satanic. I mean, because Alice Bailey, who was one of the promoters of New Age when it's in its origins, didn't beat around the bush. I mean, her printing press was the Luciferian printing press. She worshipped Satan, and she was out to destroy Christianity. And one of the key tenets of what she said was to promote homosexuality and make homosexuality an alternative lifestyle. And and people that wave rainbow flags and promote transgenderism and homosexuality and all this new age stuff are basically promoting what is an evil religion. And you see, if somebody said, "Oh, I want to cross," on the platform. I want to honour God at this conference, and they would say, "Oh, no religious symbols are allowed." But actually, they don't even realise that these rainbow flags are actually religious symbols. But that's the truth of it. And yeah, anyway, it's I one good thing that's happened at the moment is that since that Supreme Court ruling that basically said that you know in government spheres anybody that is born a man must be treated as a man and must go to a male prison and must use male toilets, and in the National Health Service must be go to male wards. That's now a ruling from the Supreme Court, and since that ruling, the whole atmosphere has changed. So we've made major strides forward, and then with what Trump has done in the United States, where he said there's only two genders, male and female, and anyone that promotes anything other than two genders will not be funded by the United States Treasury. We'll have to find your own funds, and all of a sudden there's now only two genders in the United States. I mean, and suddenly this whole transsexual promotion has lost popularity enormously, and you don't see anything like as many rainbow flags now as you used to, I'm glad to say.
Beware, Rachel and Keir, of what's coming down the line very rapidly, because the big business people, the big known names in Britain, are starting to realise. And don't forget, many of these companies are not conservative voters at head office level, they're socialists. But even they are saying it can't go on. And never before have 3/4 of them said it's got to stop. What's going to stop? Well, taxing of businesses, whether it be national insurance, whether it be new laws, whether it be net zero in particular, it's got to stop. And businesses, and I'm going to repeat this twice, are not hiring. Businesses are no longer hiring. They're saving. That is not a good way to build any country. And the reason, of course, is tax. And we've got the worst figures anywhere for donkey's decades, Sid. Will it get through to Rachel? I doubt it for 1 minute.
Well, yes, because you see, actually, something that I said in my speech, which is true, it's reality, is that socialists think the economy is like a cake, where the rich have got a certain percentage of the cake, and if we take money off the rich and give it to the poor, then we'll have a fairer society because the rich will have less of the cake and the poor will have more of the cake. But that's not what the economy is like. The truth is that the economy is like a train where the engine is business and business produces the wealth, and the wealth that business produces then goes to pay for the carriages, to pay for education, the health service, benefits, and everything else that the government does and produces. And unless you look after the engine, you don't produce the wealth, so you have a poor country. And what's going on at the moment is that in this country, the Labour Party think the economy is like a cake, so they're acting out as if it was, taking money off the rich, trying to give it to the poor, and it's just as a result, they're just destroying and damaging business. So destroying and damaging business means they've got less money. So all of a sudden, we've now got well, now a 41 billion black hole, so they say. So they're going to have to increase tax again. So when they increase tax again, they'll do more damage to business. There'll be even less money coming in, you know, and they've just got completely the wrong approach. And very quickly, by the way, the right approach is to reduce spending, which, as I said before, should be done by reducing, by cutting quango. So you cut revenue spending. When you've cut your revenue spending, you've then got money available to increase capital spending because capital spending increases wealth and helps business. And then you cut taxes, especially taxes on business. So you help business and promote it. And that's the right approach, and that's what produces growth and produces wealth in a country. All the policies we're producing are the complete opposite. We've got drastic increase in revenue spending, drastic increase in quangos. They set up 28 new ones and increased spending by 88 billion on quangos since they've come into office. And we've cut capital spending and we've increased taxes on business. And it's all a policy for economic disaster. That's the reality.
Well, the other thing that we were going to talk about at length, really, and we've got no time to, so we'll just have a nibble at the outside today, is the performance and the existence of legality in the United Kingdom. Now, we're famous for it, but really, boy, have we got on steroids here. And the world comes to us actually for advice because there's the ordinary law, if you like, and there's the company law. And we're experts at it. But beyond that, we worship talking about religion, the law. Nobody obeys the law like the Brit. You've only got to work, as we have done for many years, and live abroad to realise, oh, you can't do that. Oh, yes, you can. There's a way around it. But it's the law. No, there's a way around it. There's another law. So you finish up being, in one sense, lawless. Now, what do I mean? Well, it really is restricting our companies at the top level because there are corporate lawyers that, can I say, 2 years out of law school are earning more than £200,000 a year in the City of London. It is expert advice, allegedly, to the big companies, the big accountancy firms, the big law firms. You can command that sort of salary. And it's the law of defence. What can you do with a company? What might be the outcome if you did this way of dealing and trading? And it's stymieing any progression, and it's tying hands behind backs. No wonder companies are going bump and are going to other countries instead because our legal system is choking us at that level, Sid.
Yes, and you see what I said about increased spending on quangos, 88 billion. See, these quangos are basically all producing regulation, which is all done legally, and it's like you say, it's strangling companies. The other thing I would say very quickly is that I have a law degree, and when you study law, one of the subjects which I studied was called jurisprudence, which is the morality of law. And when you look at that, they actually tell you in that course that if a law is immoral, you should not be obeying it. And that's basically what happened with the Nazis. You see, the defense in Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials of the people involved with the Nazi regime, was that we were obeying the law. That was what the law said, and we were doing what the law told us to do. And the judges said, you should have known that that law was immoral, and you should not be obeying that law because it was immoral. I mean, so I'm afraid saying that I was simply obeying the law is no defence. So we need to grab hold of that and apply it. Now, I mean, okay, when Hitler was in charge and producing these terrible laws to kill all Jews and all this sort of thing, you say, well, it was obviously immoral. But then there are other laws which are not quite so obviously immoral, but they're still immoral. And you mentioned earlier in this discussion the new ID scheme they're introducing. I believe that that is immoral. And I don't intend to participate in any ID scheme, whether they introduce it or not. And I would encourage other people to do the same, because I believe that that is an immoral law and a dangerous law. So we have to be aware that not every law is something that has to be obeyed. There is a higher law, which is God's law, and it's God's law that we should always obey.
We're coming to the end, Sid. We've got to move on and turn the temperature down a bit. Or do I really mean that to our footy section? And the UN, after their recent report on Israel and Gaza, are now encouraging all the big boys that control our football to get rid of Israel for the next World Cup. Nice, isn't it?
No, I mean, that is completely wrong. Israel has every right to participate in the World Cup and should participate in the World Cup. And the idea that somehow that Israel is worse than a nation, than many nations that are in the World Cup that have behaved terribly in their countries. I mean, Iran is an example. The idea that Israel is worse than Iran. Iran is putting a lot of people to death at the moment because they're concerned that the regime will be overthrown following some of the actions they've taken. And anyone that's supporting demonstrations is literally being hanged in the streets. But Iran is allowed to participate in the World Cup, but not Israel. I'm sorry, no. And by the way, just while we're talking about football, I'll say very quickly, last week, you asked me to name what I thought was the greatest footballer to have received the Ballon d'Or, and I said Lionel Messi. Some people actually said to me afterwards that I shouldn't have said Lionel Messi, I should have said Pele. It turns out that the Ballon d'Or was until 1995 was only European, and only from 2003 did it become available worldwide to anybody. So I'm afraid in the 1970s, when Pele was doing his football, he was not entitled to receive the Ballon d'Or. So I believe my answer was the correct answer, even though Pele may well have been the greatest footballer of all time.
I've got to say for all the viewers, and this is impinging on your privacy, Sid, I know. But he's not slept since saying that. Actually, for a week, he's not slept. I hope he can sleep now. I hope his conscience is clear. Listen, we've got to go, but I've got to mention one thing, and that is ladies have taken over sport. There are a number of reasons why. Basically, it's dead cheap for the BBC to promote women's sport of whatever type. So you get overexposure maybe, and what you do not need is overexposure of this type. I've always admired rugby. It's not my game, but I've admired it from the point of view of the behaviour on the terraces, and also the behaviour of the footballers, the rugby players. Now, if they disagree with the ref, it's not like football, where you get referees pushed about. Well, he did before the death penalty was given for doing such things. But there was a riot down under at the rugby league final, the ladies, because they didn't agree with one decision. And there was a big brawl, there was bloody noses, bloody lips, and the whole teams were together fighting. That would never happen in men's rugby. What are the ladies doing right or wrong?
I can't. What am I supposed to say?
Whatever you say, Sid, it's going to be held against you, and you're going to be wrong. So calm yourself. And does it illustrate anything?
Well, all we can say is that women have different temperaments for men, and we're not all made to be the same. And God bless them. And I enjoy watching women's sport. I enjoy watching the England win the women's World Cup. Although I looked at some of the women there and I thought, well, you don't look particularly feminine to me. But God bless them. And when it comes to women athletics, by the way, I love watching women athletics, and we've got some great women runners. And I think women's sport is an excellent thing and something that should be encouraged.
Well, Sid has fallen. I thought he would. It was a deliberately trapped question. We now know he watches ladies' football to see who he thinks is feminine and who is not. You should keep your eye on the ball, Sid. Thank goodness you do that politically. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.